Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Tiffany and I give our all to this podcast with curating information, researching platforms, and creating a show with the best up to date information we can. We have a vested interest in the growth and health of your business and hope you feel the same way about us. Would you like to produce a show? Of course you would. All you have to do is email us at thebusinessbehindsmallbusiness@gmail.com to express your interest, and we will share with you all of the marketing opportunities you will get in exchange. Please support us so that we can continue supporting you. And with that, we welcome you to our show, The Business Behind Small Business. Whether you're selling or staying, we're here to remind you that just because you own a business, that does not mean you are a business owner. Nope. We are your hosts, Savannah Stone and
Tiffany KO.
That's it. Sharing the more finite details of entrepreneurship, revealing the
check
dots.
what my name was this morning.
No, who am I? Sharing the more finite details of entrepreneurship, revealing the dots between startup and success. No one gets to $1 million without getting a little dirty. There's a lot of business behind small business, so let's get to it.
Let's start.
Yes.
What are we talking about today?
All right. So, well, there's no sense in asking whose idea it was for today's show.
If you've been listening to our show, you'll probably be right with your first guess.
Yeah. It was
Who decided today's topics?
All right. So let me explain my inspiration here. We all look to someone when it comes to growing our businesses. Oftentimes, it's someone that we already know. Sometimes it's a family member or maybe someone else that we have a relationship with. But a lot of times, there's someone in history that really motivates us. Sometimes it's someone we know from television or from books that just really knocked it out of the park, or someone we learned about it in school. This person could have inspired us. These people could have inspired us to be more and to do more. And that is the inspiration for today's episode. So today we're going to dive into influential persons and in history and why we're drawn to them and what can we glean from them. Before we begin, please note our disclaimer. This is available in both our show notes and on our website and should be referred to before and or after this podcast.
Okay, so I feel like we should shake it up and have you start. What? Oh, what an audible. Come on. This is your jam. Let's go.
All right. Fine.
I'm putting myself in a very sensitive position here to have to follow up the history buff here like you are. So, okay.
You lie. All right, fine. Okay, so I don't think I've made it a secret who my entrepreneurial crushes are. I talk about Ruth Handler and Marjorie Merriweather Post every chance I get. I mean, it's almost turned into a drinking game, I feel like. But they are the most amazing business owners of whom I've had the honor of reading a lot about. But I'm not going to go talking about either of them because I feel like you guys have heard enough about them from me. And plus, the Barbie movie, I feel like, has really opened up a lot of avenues about Ruth Handler, which I think is fantastic. So the woman that I'm going to talk about is so inspirational and so influential to my life growing up. Even at a young age, I knew she was a trailblazer, and I mean, she had to be. She was nothing like her contemporaries. And as an adult, when I went back to read about her life, I really could not believe how she not only made her message, but became one of the most powerful women in Hollywood and perhaps, I'd say, in history. Drum roll, please.
Bold claim.
Yeah, right. Okay. Lucille Ball was born August 6th, 1911 in Jamestown, New York. Her father worked for the Bell Telephone Company, and because of his career, they frequently moved during her early childhood. When Lucille was 3 years old, her father passed away from typhoid fever at the age of 27. Her mother was pregnant at the time with her second child, and so she and her mother returned to New York to live with her mother's parents. Her aunt and uncle and their daughter, I believe her name was Cleo, lived there as well. Lucy's mother remarried a man who didn't really want kids, and he convinced her mother to leave Lucy with his parents. Cleo continued to grow up in a loving environment with Lucy's grandparents. However, for Lucy, her time with her step-grandparents was severe and polarizing. Her step-grandparents were puritanical Swedish couple who banished all mirrors from the house except for the one over the bathroom sink. I think there was a story about how she like gazed into the bathroom mirror longer than
Uh-huh.
what they deemed appropriate, and they beat her for it.
Seems very
I don't know.
intense.
Intense. So, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go fast forward now to when Lucy had already begun her acting career. In 1948, Ball was cast as a wacky wife in My Favorite Husband, which was a radio show for CBS. This show was so successful that CBS asked her to develop it for television. She agreed, but only if she could work with her real life husband, Cuban bandleader Desi Arnaz. CBS did not believe that the general public would buy this beautiful white woman being married to a Cuban man, and so there was a lot of pushback. Lucy could have taken it. She could have been like, okay, you're right. I should be married to a white guy. I'll leave Desi at home. But she didn't. She really wanted Desi to have a voice. And not only did she want Desi to have a voice, she wanted him to have an appropriate income. So she decided to create Desilu Productions. And the production company
Oh,
was what produced I Love Lucy. Isn't that
I love
crazy?
Lucy.
Like,
Yeah.
that was smart. That was smart of her because
Mm-hmm.
Desi was not going to be making the same amount as everybody else. So, anyway, she also knew her place as a woman in Hollywood. So she let her husband run Desilu, and for all intents and purposes, allowed everyone to believe that he was the owner and of the founder of Desilu.
What, just so we get a context, what year is this? What decade are we talking
I
about?
believe it was 1948 at that point.
40? I was gonna say 40s or 50s. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
She
my
was probably
favorite
better off letting
husband,
a man run it for the world to
absolutely,
see. Yes.
absolutely. So my favorite husband became I Love Lucy, and it was the first
Oh,
real
okay.
sitcom developed by a husband and wife team. Uh,
Mhm.
Desilu Studios pioneered the multi-camera shot, and it was filmed in front of a live audience, which was never done prior to that. So if you had wanted to do it the original way it was done with one camera, they would have to film the same scene with audience laughter 3 different times. So instead, they had 3 different cameras, and they pioneered that. Like, that's insane. We
I can't
think of
believe
that
nobody
as
thought of that before.
exactly. Well, they were the first real sitcom. There was no such thing as a
Wow.
sitcom prior to them. Isn't that
Hmm.
incredible? So
Nice.
she also pioneered having distinct sets that were adjacent to each other. So, like, one set is the kitchen and the other set is the living room, instead of having it like a play would be, where everything is in one
I see.
place, right?
So it's like
Crazy.
more dynamics, right? Like you feel like you're traveling with the show instead of just
Yes.
being in
So
one
you actually
static
feel like you're
setting.
traveling from
Right.
you actually are in a
One room to the
kitchen.
other.
You're not in what
Hmm.
what the audience is to believe is the kitchen. When Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz divorced, Lucy bought Arnaz's shares, and she became the 100% controller of the production company. During this time, Lucille produced several popular shows. I'm only going to name a few: The Untouchables, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible.
I
Can
know
you
people
believe
don't
no?
know that she did Star Trek and Mission Impossible.
I
That's
know,
why I
like,
love her.
I know, and the crazy thing is that no other studio wanted to touch Star Trek.
Well, it was so controversial at the time too.
It
Like they
really
were
was,
he was also trying to make a statement, right? Gene Roddenberry, he
for
was trying to
sure.
make a statement, a lot of political statement within in a way, and doing it with aliens made it more palatable to the audience. So
Right.
yes, nobody wanted to touch it.
And fun fact, it was the first television show to air an interracial kiss.
Yes. Yeah.
So in
Love Star Trek.
1967, she sold the shares of her studio for 155 million in today's dollars, and that studio was renamed Paramount Television.
Well, I've heard
So,
of those. I think I streamed that.
yeah, 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 so do I. I watched it last night.
It's a
So now you're
small little place.
I mean, right? So now you're probably wondering what it was about Lucille Ball that I found so inspirational. Well, like her, when someone would tell her, no, you can't do that, or no, you're not allowed, she created the path by creating her production studio. Um,
Hmm.
I also found that at a very young age. I loved watching her because Desi would always tell Lucy, "No, you can't do that," and she would be like, "All right, fine," but then
And she'll go
she
do
would
it.
just went through with it. She still did it, and even if what she did was like it blew up in her face in one way or another, she was still doing it. Like Girlfriend was taking chances, even if
Well,
she
that's
had
the
to.
thing is sometimes
Yeah,
shoveling
like she kept.
I was
She was
gonna
like,
say when
having to shovel the
yeah,
chocolate in her mouth just so I find I have been in that situation multiple times. So I'm
shoveling
sorry, you were going
cookies
to
in
say,
your mouth.
yeah. No, I mean like symbolically, where you're like trying to hide what
Kidding.
you're what so that you don't get in trouble, but like here you are, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So
But I mean, this sounds like, we were kind of talking about before we started recording, which was, do like, don't, sometimes you just don't overthink
yeah,
things. Just do it. It sounds like she just did it. When somebody told her no, somebody who was thinking, no, that sounds like a bad idea. She's like, yeah.
yep, yeah, absolutely. She took chances. She was the first woman to own a major studio, and she not only invested in herself, she invested in the future of others. Lucille Ball
In the
also.
time,
Mhm.
so that our listeners remember, sorry to interrupt you, but in a time where women couldn't even open their own bank accounts without their husband, she
Absolutely.
ran a multi-million-dollar production studio. So it's kind of
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. I believe that the final women's right within a marriage was, which I'm not going to talk about what it was. You can look it up. Of the final right for a woman in a marriage was given to women in 1994, where a
Really?
woman, yes, uh, yeah, where a woman did not
Really?
have to, yeah, 1994. Hmm. I'll talk about it
Whoa, okay.
offline. Yeah, but
1994. I didn't realize it was so soon. I knew that for women to open their own personal bank accounts, it was like in the 70s, and I don't think it was until the
70s.
80s. Yeah, until they were late 80s, until they were able to open a business bank account, or
Yes.
like
Yep.
business bank account to even buy houses and all that stuff, like without a husband or a male relative until like the late 80s, which that always blows my mind, being somebody who was
Yeah.
actually alive in the 80s, not realizing
Yeah.
that this was, it didn't matter to me because I wasn't an adolescent then, but like I just didn't know it was so recent.
Yeah, women didn't have a whole lot of rights within marriage. And one of the biggest rights within a marriage was not deemed a right until 1994, which again
Oh,
blows my mind because, like,
still makes the
I was,
stuff that she did so amazing, right? Like to be
oh, yeah,
in that world and decade.
I was engaged to be married in 1994. So if anybody wants to like bring that to real, to a real place, I got married in 96. So yeah, crazy. So anyway, she also reinvented herself multiple times. Actually, she reinvented herself, and she still honored her own brand because when she first started out, she was considered a B movie actress. You can look up even pictures of her that are very glamorous. These very glamorous photos of her, and
Hmm.
then like she kind of went into comedy. She wasn't a storied comedian. Um,
Oh, I see.
but she went on to create a television show that was the most historically successful of all time. And don't forget, no one believed that a woman with her hair and her looks could ever be found attractive, much less
That is very true.
believable
Yeah.
to have been married to a Cuban man. And Cuba, at this time was communist. And Lucille Ball
Hmm.
was also framed as a communist,
Ah,
which
yep.
you can read about. I'm not going to go into it, but regardless, like it wasn't just her looks; it was also her. She wasn't a communist, but she had a lot going on. Well, and I'm not going to sleep on Desi Arnaz either. He knew the financial benefits of reruns, and by doing that, he created syndication, and by he buying the episodes of I Love Lucy from CBS, he was able to retain the integrity of the show and create a financial legacy for his children.
See, very smart.
Right. So, what do
Hmm.
you got?
Okay, so I was trying to find. So I feel like I've talked about Sarah Blakely a lot of times on our podcast,
Yes.
and I've
Yes.
also already like talked about Dame Stephanie Shirley, which is also
Yes.
inspiration for me. So
Hmm.
then I was kind of like, all right, I don't want to like use the same. Let me go think about this. So then I settled, not settled, but I was thinking about. You'll see where this is going eventually.
Okay.
I
All
was
right.
thinking about
I'm
Julia
following
Child
you.
because Julia Childs, right? Because I just
Oh,
love
yeah.
everything about her, and I've read the books about her, and just how her like fascinating career started at like the ripe old age of like late 50s, early 60s, and also groundbreaking in a lot of areas in TV industry, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
nobody thought somebody with her looks and the stuff she was cooking would ever be popular, and she's made so much like change. But then I feel like, okay, well, there's movies made about her, there's books about her, everybody probably already heard about her, so okay, maybe not that. But it did get me thinking about food, so I started looking around, and I
I think I
came
know what you're
up.
going to say.
Who?
Go on.
Oh,
No, go
okay,
on. Go on.
okay.
Go on.
No, but you have to say it first now, so
I can't
you
remember
can't.
her name. I, but
But
it
what'd
might.
she do?
Okay, go.
But
She
what'd she
was the
do?
first. She was the first. If it's the same person, I think it is. She was the first woman to have a cooking show on television, and she was
No, but
Asian.
that'd be kind of cool. Oh, you're talking about Joy
Joy.
Joy Chen?
Yeah. Yes. Joy
Yeah.
Chen.
So almost. So I did. So she was one of the top contenders of what I was going. By the way, super, super fascinating. This is why I love doing this podcast, because it kind of puts me down rabbit holes of like discovering new things I never thought about. But she was a close one. I almost picked her, but then I found the story of Margaret Rutkin.
Yeah.
Do you know who she is? Margaret. So when I was little, because so in our house, like we didn't have a lot of snacks and stuff like that. Like we're not a big snacking family, which is kind of funny because we're Asian. And if you go to an Asian grocery store, there's just aisles of just snacks, right? But we definitely didn't keep a lot of American snacks around, right? So there just wasn't a lot. So when you're a kid, you always want what you can't have,
Of
right?
course.
So of course, you go to school and you have your lunchbox, and your lunchbox doesn't look like every other kid's lunchbox. And all the other kids have all this like peanut butter and jelly sandwich and all these things. And I'm just like over here drooling, right? But the one thing I love eating, and I always saw other kids have, was goldfish crackers. Just, and even till this day, and like I don't eat as much now because, I'm sure it's not healthy for me, but I could sit there and snack on goldfish crackers all the
Oh
time.
my
So,
God. Anybody could, especially the
yeah.
zesty ones or whatever those. Oh,
Yes, the
that
cheddar
sounds amazing right now.
ones. Yes. So the fact that she was the founder of Pepperidge Farm, I was like, okay, yeah, I have to figure out what her story is. Now, so
Mhm.
I didn't know it went really far back. It was like in the 1930s, late 1930s, when she kind of got started. And the reason why it was called Pepperidge Farm is that was what the place that she owned with her family, that's what it was called. They just called the house Pepperidge Farm. It was like a quaint little house that they had in Fairfield, Connecticut. And she was a mother of three. And what happened was her youngest kid had severe allergies and asthma, and she wanted to be able to make him something that he can truly enjoy that was like wholesome and it didn't have a whole bunch of commercial additives and things like that. Now, don't forget, this is like pre Julia Child, right? So at this era, well, I mean, she was alive, but she wasn't like famous yet, right? But in this era, like the common foods that were popular had a lot, it's all like very quick stuff, right? Things you can like make really quickly. So there's a lot of additives, and there's a lot of like, it wasn't like a time where there was a lot of healthy, fresh food around.
What years
And
are we
so
talking? Are we talking 40s, 50s, or
like
30s?
early 40s,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. In the
right?
'40s,
Plus the war,
especially.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was there were
A lot of
and a lot
canned
of things
stuff.
were not available to the yeah. A lot of the good
Exactly.
stuff were not available because they were being used for war rations.
Exactly. So just to kind of set the setting, so I mean, for us of this generation to understand what it's like to be in that era, and you're just trying to bake fresh bread for your family, and it's hard because there's not ingredients that are just readily around like we have today. So the interesting part is she's no baker by any means. Like this is not her thing. But she was obviously motivated because she wanted to do this for her kid. So she actually, through lots of trial and error, perfected a loaf of bread from stone ground whole wheat, milk, honey, and yeast.
Hmm.
And apparently that was a revolutionary thing at that particular time in history.
Mm-hmm.
And so she, started the business kind of based off of that. And it quickly became a family affair because she got really popular. And soon, like, her kitchen was already too small to actually kind of handle all the production that's involved. And the one thing I would say about her is that her and her husband made quite a team. So, going back to the whole thing you were talking about, just kind of power couples, like, he was focused on pretty much like strategy and finance, and she was like everything else, operations and everything else, right? So one of the things she did is, as soon as this was going back in back when she was starting, she convinced the bank to give her a $1,500 loan. So, and this, I'm sure her husband has signed off on it, right?
Oh yeah,
So in this day and
definitely.
age, it's about $28,000, $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at that point, anything in the food industry was very much male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she really believed in the bread that she had, which is what she started with. And so as it grew, um, she grew pretty quickly once she got the loan, and then her husband, her kids, and everybody had to pitch in, right? Because it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a family affair, a small business that she eventually kind of outgrew from her house.
Mm-hmm.
um and then what she did was, like, the one thing that she was really good at was quality control, which I figured you would appreciate. Quality control, because the fact that, when you are trying to produce something as fresh as making bread, like, and you're trying to do it in big quantities, like, quality control becomes a thing, right? Your whole
Yeah.
marketing, your whole brand is based on freshness
Right.
of what you're actually providing. So even though they started scaling, she made sure that there was never any compromises on the ingredient. And so she herself was the one that kind of took head of distributions and logistics to make sure that, even though while she's expanding, all the bread that's being delivered are fresh.
Hmm.
Smart lady, I have to say.
Quite. It's so funny because
So,
there used to be a
uh-huh.
Pepperidge Farm store, strangely enough,
Mm-hmm.
around the corner from where I lived, and that's where I went to buy my bread.
Ah,
Yeah,
I feel like I've seen one before, and I've been to them a couple times when I was living in Richmond. But then I don't know if they're around anymore. I just don't think, like,
I don't
there's
think
actual
that they
stores
are.
anymore. But
No, it was really random. It was in a like a shopping center, and like the grocery store was not far from it. Like I would go to the grocery store, but then I would go to Pepperidge Farm to buy my bread.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, now they have this whole expansion line. I mean, like, if you go to any kind of like a grocery store now, like, there's a whole bunch of Pepperidge Farm types of
Oh yeah,
cookies and all these things, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's it's super cool just to think that at some point this was all done out of kind of a home kitchen.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and she was like super diligent about how she grew the business, and also how she interacted with her customers. For her, it was all about marketing, brand, and quality. And so, like, for example, for her customers, like, she would make sure that she actually wrote little notes in the things that she delivered in her bread deliveries to each of her
What?
customers. And that's kind of how she kind of grew, just by word of mouth. And eventually, of course, they could do more marketing, but
Huh?
she, also paid a lot of attention to, like, her customer feedback, and she improved and expanded based on what she was hearing from her customers. And so from that, she was able to not just expand in the US, but she eventually expanded outside of the US, and she started introducing a lot of European style cookies instead of just bread. And she kind of built like a production line out of that, which
Hmm.
is kind of cool. Like, she
That is
just,
cool.
like, slow and steady, I guess, but it
Yeah,
wasn't really
yeah.
slow and steady. I think it was actually really, really fast how she ended up doing it. So she started in 1937. So in 1961, so it was only about 20 some years later, she ended up selling, the family ended up selling Pepperidge Farm to Campbell Soup Company
Mm-hmm.
for $28 million. Now, mind you, this
Good
is
heavens.
1961, right? So
Good.
that's a few $100 million today, a
Yeah,
couple hundred
right?
million dollars today, probably, right? And then under that, Campbell, of course, started really, like, pushing and expanding the line. So now this is the Pepperidge Farm that we know today, right? Like, the
Mm-hmm.
cookies, the bread, the goldfish crackers.
I love
She's the reason why
goldfish.
I was jealous when I was in school. Now I know. Now I'm craving it. Now I'm like, I should probably pick up some
I
goldfish
know,
crackers.
right?
It's
Like
been a while.
I'm
It's like
like
the best
getting
snack
hungry.
ever. Who ever thought of that? especially the cheddar one.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know.
I don't know a mother
So
alive that would be able to get through their child's first 3 years
right.
without goldfish crackers or Cheerios.
I just remember the first time I had it, I was kind of like, man, I've never tasted anything like this. Like, because our, Asian snacks just aren't infused with those kind of flavors, right?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
of course, now like the Milano cookies and yeah.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah, and
Americans
that's why
like
I don't buy them
cheese.
because I will eat the whole bag
Yeah, yeah.
on my own.
Americans like the cheese. There's a lot of
Hmm.
cheese-based snacks, and
Yeah.
they love their salt and they love their sweet. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of sugar in the
Which is
sugary snacks.
not in Asian culture, like snacking
Nah,
very
not
much.
in
We don't like
Armenian
things too
or Arab
sweet.
culture either.
Um, most half of our population is lactose intolerant, so there goes the cheese part. And we
Yeah,
do
no,
like
I
salty
hear you.
and savory quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know what snack would I have ever eaten that was non-American. Like, I don't think Armenians even really have snacks per se. I mean, we have meze. So I think meze
So,
is what's considered.
I think like in our culture, the reason why we have so many snacks, like when you go out shopping, isn't for like your household consumption. It's to have around. So when you have guests over, you can lay out
Oh
snacks.
yeah.
It's not for your kids.
No,
Yeah.
no,
So I was
no.
like, I never grew up snacking.
Yeah. No, same thing. Same thing. We only had meze, and like meze only ever happened if people came over. So if I wanted something to eat, I would just pull out the cheese and cucumbers and pita bread, and that was my snack.
See?
Or red pepper
Yep.
paste and olives and pita bread. But like
Sounds
I didn't
about.
have snacks.
Well, we definitely didn't have too much olives in our house. That was definitely pita bread and yeah, definitely very different types of snacks in my house. I think our snack is like, oh, there's a bowl of fried rice in the fridge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Get yourself some rice.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, if there's leftovers from yesterday, that's your snack.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I didn't grow up snacking. Snacking is definitely a Western thing.
It is, yeah. It was always something to look forward to, especially when I went to a friend's house, right? Because,
Hmm.
yeah,
I mean, yeah. And I
fun
guess
stuff.
snacking is like it is also a European. I mean, they've got their tea time, they've got their afternoon teas, and they've got their high teas. So depending on how famished you are, but we didn't have that. We just had meze. But the thing about like the way Armenians eat, which is also the way like I would say because we all lived together for thousands of years, the Greeks, the Syrians, the Armenians, the
Right.
Assyrians,
All
Turks, the
influenced.
Arabs, like all of us. Um, Food time can be 3 hours long. So you start with a meze and then you work your way to dinner and then you work your way to
Love it.
coffee. Like, so food eating is like 3 or 4 hours long. So I guess you
Oh,
are
I
kind of
love it.
snacking
Yeah.
into dinner.
So you were just
You're
eating all day long.
all day long. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
So, mm, mm,
All right.
mm.
So before we move on to the raw truth, we want you to be a part
Yes.
of our conversation and let us know what you want to hear. Send us questions or comments to our email, thebusinessbehindsmallbusiness@gmail.com, to ask questions related to our show or just let us know how much you love us. I'd love to hear that more often. We want to give you what you want to learn about. So, we're going to get into the raw truth where we each share our own gritty experience with today's topic. I don't know that is going to be so gritty, but I do want to share a raw truth. Do you have a raw truth?
Well, I didn't really know how it would be applicable to today.
Yeah, I know. I
So
know.
I
I
didn't
get it,
really
but
come up with one. I kind of figured
it's
this was
okay.
going to take the place of raw truth plus like famous example because in itself is a famous example.
Yeah, true. Well, I mean, I have a little bit more to stretch, not stretch, but to give another layer about Lucille Ball and all of
Okay.
the things. So this episode wasn't just about talking to you all about a famous persons and how successful they were. I mean, at the root of it all, it's why we did choose this person and how did they inspire us. Mind you, there
Hmm.
are not enough episodes to talk about all of the people that have influenced me or have influenced us. However,
Yeah.
I'm so moved by Lucille Ball to think of how very little people know about her business acumen. I just felt like we should talk about that. And you with Pepperidge Farm. I mean, I had no idea about it being like an actual Pepperidge Farm. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone knows her as a comedian or as an actress, but she was just so much more than that. I mean, I named a few of the shows that she was responsible for bringing to television, but there were a lot more that I know everyone has heard of. Lucille Ball had a very harsh childhood with very little love in it. She was surrounded by people who took advantage of her and just narcissistic people between her mom and her stepfather. Her cousin lived the kind of life she would have wanted to live, and instead of taking that and living a life of resentment, she paved her own path so that she could also have a happy life. She's a wonderful example of picking yourself up by the bootstrings and giving yourself what you want, as opposed to envying whatever went around you. Her life story resonated with me because I did not have an easy childhood and I also had to forge my own path in order to get the things that I wanted. It would have been so much simpler for me to be resentful and blame everyone around me for my current situation or my then current situation, but instead, I decided this is not the life I should have, so I changed paths. And every time life put me in a situation I did not want to be in, that's what I did. I changed paths. Lucille Ball did the same thing. So did Audrey Hepburn, Ruth Handler, Marjorie Merriweather Post, Maya Angelou, and quite a few others who've influenced me heavily and shaped me into who I am today. No.
Excuse me. Mm. Mm.
That's your reaction? No, I'm kidding.
That was my reaction.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Whew. Hair
Well,
in my throat, though.
it's okay. I mean, anyway,
Well,
so
you
now
know,
we're going to move on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
You
I
go.
was gonna say that. Like, I think it's always great to keep people like this in mind, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes, or a lot of times, I feel like when you run a business and you're starting it up and you're kind of a solo entrepreneur who maybe ended up hiring people and you're kind of building more of a company enterprise feel, it's a lonely path, right? Like you're kind of doing it yourself, and it's just good to know that others have walked the same path, maybe with
Mm-hmm.
similar challenges that you face,
Mm-hmm.
that you know that it can be done,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, I'd like to think that it was not a coincidence that we chose women. Both of us chose women. Huh.
Well,
Because
okay, so yeah, I don't think either you and I would label ourselves as a feminist.
no.
Or
Yeah,
would
no,
we?
maybe
No,
not.
I don't think so.
I don't
I don't know.
know. I think I
You
have feminist
hesitated for a second. I
tendencies.
was like, sorry.
I have feminist
Well,
tendencies. I think we all do, right? Like,
we are female. I mean, come on. So, but I mean, I don't think we would label ourselves as what a popular definition of feminist is. I guess that's the way to say it,
yeah,
right? But you always admire and look up to those people who are like you. So I
yeah,
would say naturally we would gravitate toward women because, well, eh, you know,
that is true. That is
yeah.
true.
Still,
I mean,
last time we, yeah, still a woman.
I had so many more that I could have named off, but like those are the people that, I mean, you just got to pay attention, right? You pay attention to the people around you that you admire. And honestly, pay attention to the people that you think are doing it wrong too. And make notes of the
Yeah,
people that are doing it wrong so that you don't do it wrong as well. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
today with the famous example, we are going to flip the script a little bit. So we already gave our famous example. Our famous examples were already part of the episode. So I thought it would be great. Not Tiffany. I don't know if you've got an example that inspired you and inspired today's discussion, but I have real people. So instead of famous example, I'm going to do no one knows this person example. In each episode, we'd like to connect the famous example, but today we're not going to do that. Today
So today we're going to
I'm
connect it
going,
with the no one knows this example. Like,
nobody else is going to know this person.
oh no,
So
go right ahead. Just on a different note though, on a very different note, and this is my bad because I got you talking in the beginning though. I do need to scoot in like 5-10 minutes. Like
I'll talk
scoot.
fast.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm not gonna have an example. Go right ahead. All you
All right.
for the next 10
Okay.
minutes. All you.
All right. I'm going to flip the script. Like I said, So today, I think you've heard me talk. Today, I'm going to talk about somebody who inspired me and inspired this episode. I think if you heard me talk about a woman who worked for one of my uncles who taught me quite a bit about business and what it
Mhm.
is to be a business owner. She was extremely influential to my life and gave me the foundation um, of what I needed to do and to be in order to start a business and be successful in it. The funny thing is she probably didn't know that all of the advice she gave me sunk in very deep into my brain. Likely she was sharing with me advice that other people were probably not taking because I do that a lot. I'll talk to my dogs or I'll talk to my kids about things that they're not listening to me. And she probably thought I wasn't listening, but I was. Many of the systems that I currently have, the processes that I have, and the core of who I am as a business person, it came from her and her advice. Another person that was extremely influential, whether or not he knew it, was my uncle. And I know that I need to narrow this down because most of my family on both sides own a business. So this is my father's older brother. He came to this country with very little, and he actually left Lebanon with very little. So it's not like he had any real seed money to start a business, but he opened up a body shop in Alexandria. He knew very little of the language, had no real formal education, and frankly, he really didn't know a whole lot about business either. But he managed to create not only a multi-million dollar company, but it also became multi-generational company. Mind you, he was an extremely shrewd businessman and not everyone's favorite person. But when it comes to the kind of business he was in and from the background that he came from, you really couldn't expect him to be nice. My dad, who worked for him, used to take me into work sometimes, and I would just watch my uncle and the conversations he would have with people. And I still remember them very clearly to this day. And he probably had no idea that I was paying attention, but I was. His sons took over from there, and it's now working towards being handed to the third generation. So,
That's amazing.
I learned a lot from quite a few members of my family who had long term businesses, unbeknownst to them. And of course, from the manager of one of my uncle's businesses. She was hilarious. She was an awesome woman. And because of her, I also knew a little bit of Yiddish. So
Well, that's
there's that.
quite an experience.
Yeah, right. Okay, so if do
Yeah.
you have any
Amazing.
apps, recommendations, books? Because if you don't, I do.
Of
You
course
know
you
I
do.
do.
No, not on today's topics though, but I do find fascinating. I just would say that I always find inspiration in like biographies or memoirs of people that
Yes.
I look up to, and I do pick it up and read it. Most recently, I've been reading a lot of Julia Childs again. Just in times where things get a little challenging, and a little tough. So
Yeah,
whoever
absolutely.
your person is, take a look through. I'm sure somebody has written something about them.
Well, you know what? I'm going to give a few examples of places in which you could go to where I bet you're going to find the person that you admire. You're probably going to find him here. So,
Okay.
first, I'm going to say that there are two great movies available that greatly encompass how influential and powerful Lucy and Desi were. One of them is the movie Being the Ricardos with Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem. If you can get past seeing
Mm.
Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball, you'll see that this movie really, really tunes into how great they were as business partners. Also on Amazon Prime is a fabulous documentary called Lucy and Desi. This was produced by Amy Poehler, and she also narrates it. She gives an inside look into the couple's business, their love story, and a lot of great background. I've watched it; it's fantastic. Who they were as individuals and as a couple. I also recommend a
Very nice.
couple of books as well. For example, American Empress, The Life and Times of Marjorie Merriweather Post by Nancy Rubin Stewart, and Dream
Nice.
Doll, The Ruth Handler Story. And this was written by Ruth Handler and Jacqueline Shannon. I also highly recommend you listen to the podcast, The History Chicks, which is where I had heard all about all three of these women's life stories for the first time. And that's what started my trip down the rabbit hole. I knew some things, but not as much as these two ladies share. Go ahead and take a
Ah.
listen to their other episodes because if you're like me and you love to hear history, every person that they talk about is going to be a woman. So if you're looking at other businesses, I really, really like the Business Wars. That's a fabulous
Yeah, that's a fun
podcast
one
as
to
well
listen to.
about great businesses in history. Lastly,
Yeah.
we're going to share some links as well in our show notes for you to also take a deep dive into Lucille Ball. So
Very nice.
yeah, so please join us. for our next episode, where we will discuss 5 accounting mistakes that could cost you your business. We'll probably talk about more than 5, but I just capped it at 5. Stay tuned. Please show us your support by following us on your preferred podcast platform. Say that 3 times fast. Social media and YouTube. We'd love for you to also share our episodes. And hey, we've also got YouTube Shorts now. And find us on TikTok. I'm everywhere.
So you
We're
follow us,
everywhere
it'll
now.
pop up in your feed.
Yeah. All of our links are posted below. And until next time, mind the business behind your business, because all great successes start small. Until next time.
Bye.